Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're going to be showing you guys how to color grade your drone footage. Albert and I, we just got back from the 30-day road trip where we shot drone footage at a bunch of different places, but today we're going to be color grading 3 different sequences. We have a sequence of Chicago skyline at night. Right. Then clip number 2, what do we have?
This was shot in in New Jersey, going towards Manhattan, across
the Hudson.
Yeah, across.
So
the
we
Hudson.
have number 2. We have New York City during the day, and then we also have the Hoover Dam hyperlapse, and we're going to be talking a little bit about color grading that versus color grading this log footage, so you guys can see, you know, firsthand how log footage grades compared to regular footage. This one's actually a hyperlapse, so stay tuned for that one, but let's jump right into it. So if that sounds interesting, if you guys like this type of content, make sure to get subscribed, hit that like button. I do all sorts of content around content creation, LinkedIn, building your influence, and also documenting and storytelling along the way. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Alright, so we have opened up Final Cut Pro here, and in this project, it's a 4K project, I have 3 different clips. So we have the first clip is this Chicago skyline at night, then we have the New York City skyline during the day, and this hyperlapse of the Hoover Dam. And by the way, there is a no-fly zone around the Hoover Dam, but we flew outside of that and up into that point, so this footage was good here. But let's just give you a quick little play here of all 3 clips. So here we have Chicago, and here we have New York City, and here we have the hyperlapse. So now keep in mind, when you're playing it back, you're not going to be getting the full quality here in this rendering, but that's okay because it does good enough for us to get our job done. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open up the properties panel here on the right. This is where we're actually going to be applying our color correction. But then we're also going to want to hit View, Video Scopes, or Command 7. I'm going to go ahead and close this left panel. But again, if you hit View, Video Scopes, that will pop open your video scope inspector. Now within this inspector here, you have a couple different options. You can have 1 or multiple. I just like doing just 1, but then if you click this, you can select whether you want a histogram, or you want a vector scope, or you want a waveform. For the beginning of our color editing workflow, we're going to be looking at the waveform, and basically what this is, there's different channels. You can do RGB parade. I like the RGB overlay of this is going to help us get our exposure proper first, which is the first step in color grading. So with this clip selected, we're going to want to open up our properties panel, and you know, in this color tab, we're going to want to add a new color correction, and we're just going to do a color board. So this is our color board, and we have multiple layers of color correction, but right now we just have this one color correction. We're going to go over to the exposure tab so we can get our exposure right. So over here on the left, this RGB overlay, you'll notice that this very bottom is not all the way at 0. 0 is going to be completely black, and 100 is going to be completely white. And this is over here on the left side of the image, and here is the right side of the image. So you could probably even see like these 2 spikes right here are coming from this building right here. So
ideally, do you want it more in the center once you're done editing, or?
Well, you want it to be whatever reflected the actuality. So during the day, you're obviously going to have a lot more stuff up in this higher exposure.
Gotcha.
During the night, you're going to have it be lower. But so basically, you're just going to take, you know, these are your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights, and we're going to drop the shadows down until that line almost hits 0. We're going to go right above. So that way, you know, these darks are really dark. It may be a little bit higher. So you see there are some peaks that are going a much lower, but
nice.
Let's just bring it down a little bit to see how that looks. And then we can bring the highlights up.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to want to bring our midtones up so you can actually kind of see what's going on here. And we're just going to keep playing with this, bring the shadows back down. Now you don't want to go too far because then you are going to start losing a lot of quality. So see how that looks kind of grainy.
It's blown out, right?
Yeah, so I think something like this, might be pretty good. So again, now we have uncorrected, corrected, and I'm just selecting this toggle wheel and just seeing, maybe we wanted to bring it up just a little bit more. Let's bring this one's the overall. This one could bring everything up or down. So let's bring the overall up a little bit, and then we can kind of keep playing with these. I like that right there, actually. So let's just kind of play it back and see how that looks. So there was this part right here that you really liked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see how it's a little bit kind of noisy right here?
Yeah.
We are kind of pushing it a little bit too far. So again, here's without it. Well, I guess it is kind of a little bit noisy, but see how it's a little bit more kind of choppy. But I like how it's just kind of just a little bit brighter, so you can kind of just see things a little bit more.
Nice.
So that's the first correction we're going to do, is we're going to be setting our exposure. So the second step in our color editing, color grading workflow is we're going to be setting the saturation. So what we could do is we could do this in another layer. So we can go ahead and add another color board. So now this is color board 2, and we'll go over to saturation. The reason why you want to set your exposure first and then your saturation is that different colors expose at different intensities. So, for example, yellow and red are going to be a lot brighter than like blues or purple. So you set your exposure right first, then you go ahead and set your color. So let's go back to this first clip here. Make sure that one's selected. And typically what I do on a lot of the log footage is I just give it a bunch of saturation until I'm pleased with it. And I just kind of leave it at that. So again, without saturation, off, on. Now you can go ahead and play with this a little bit more, but I kind of like just giving it a bit more saturation, and that's good for probably 80% of clips. Now what we could do in another layer is we could add a bit of a grade. So this is kind of just getting the exposure right and the colors right. But if we wanted to get a little bit more fancy, we could do a color grade, kind of give it an aesthetic.
Nice.
Now what I like doing here, and again, we're adding another correction layer. Color wheels 1 is we can add a little bit of a orange and teal look, a little bit of a color contrast. So in the highlights, we'll add a little bit of orange,
so
and in the shadows,
right?
Yeah, we can add a little bit of a teal. And see how these are opposite directions of each other? Orange is going up into the left, teal is going down into the right. Yeah. That means they're going to kind of contrast, and it's going to give our image that nice. And here we can kind of...
That's that sunset look, right?
Yeah. So here we can kind of over exaggerate it, but we want to do them about an equal amount. So if I just get this a little bit bigger here. And yeah, see, this is a pretty exaggerated heavy look, but I kind of like that.
Yeah. It's definitely not what it looked like in person, but then again...
Now imagine this is going to look a lot better, but if we just hit our scopes for a second, and we hit this is what it's just going to kind of look like. So maybe I'll pull that grade back just a little bit, so it's a little more real. Oh.
Whoa.
So I double clicked it, reset it, but let's pull it back to like right there and right there. So that it's just a little bit less pronounced. And again, we were dealing with very little amount of light. So keep in mind that that minimizes our ability to actually play with that color, that information. Luckily we did get our histogram such that the shadows were above the, they're not falling off our shadows, and our highlights weren't rolling off. So overall, that's how you would color grade. That's how I would color grade this footage. Yeah. So perfect segue into the second clip that we have for you guys, which is the New York City skyline. Mm-hmm. This one's shot in the day to give you guys an idea of what the differences are color grading during the day versus at night. This is going to be pretty much the same workflow. So let's go ahead and add our first color board and set our exposure. So I'm going to go kind of quickly here. We'll open up the video scopes again, and I'm just going to bring the shadows down. Nothing was really like true black, but I'd say, these little shadows right here under this boardwalk are going to be pretty close to black. So let's just bring those down to right there, and let's bring the highlights up so that, we're already kind of, let's get those highlights like right about there, and I'll bring the midtones down. So you can kind of bring the midtones down, or you could bring them up, but I think bringing them down, yeah. So typically the workflow is shadows, you're bringing them down, highlights, you're bringing them up, and then the shadow or the midtones. No, let me say that again. So log footage compresses your information, brings the shadows up, brings the highlights down. So you want to typically bringing your shadows down, bring your highlights up, and then playing with the midtones to kind of get whatever looks right. This looks pretty good right here. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So here's no grade. Wow. Grade. Look at just the difference off that already. But now let's go ahead and add in another color board for our saturation, and let's just boost it.
Ooh.
And then let's go ahead and add a nice little grade, because I really do like that orange and teal type of look.
Oh, nice.
Let's just go real subtle.
Yeah, this one, the blue color actually pops a little more, so adding a little orange just throws it off just enough.
Yeah, see how it's kind of monochromatic, a lot of blues there? This kind of makes this building right here pop out a little more. And the other way to look at saturation is if you look over here, you look at your vector scope. The way that these color chips are your different colors, and the more saturation you have, let me go back to the saturation adjustment layer, you know, the more it's going to be out towards that edge layer.
Makes sense.
And you see how it kind of gets a little flaky here? That means that you're kind of pushing it too far. So as long as those lines are, and this is where that color correcting tool comes in real handy, because then you can actually see what colors are what. So, you know, as long as it looks pretty good to you. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about what it looks like. So don't overthink it too much. Just go with what looks good. But I think if you follow that 3-step workflow, correcting your exposure, correcting your color saturation, and then adding any type of grade or color correction beyond that, will do you pretty good. So let's just go ahead.
Basically, you're the artist and this is your canvas, and only you know what looks right. Oh yeah.
And we can obviously go even more over this, but just as a quick grade, this looks beautiful. Yeah, there was one where you're just kind of coming across the water. That would have looked really cool. But yeah, this one's kind of going sideways here. Hudson Yard. So again, we got this footage intentionally because we were at the Hudson Yard earlier that day. So this is going to be B-roll to help tell the story of that vlog.
Oh yeah.
You know, so have an intention with your drone shots, but don't be afraid to practice to get better, right?
That looks so clean.
Now let's go to this last drone shot. So this one's going to be real quick because this one's going to be really difficult to grade. So the way that the hyperlapse works on the Mavic 2 Pro is that it takes a bunch of photos and then it stitches those photos together for you in a hyperlapse, which is like a moving time lapse, and it gives you that in a 1080p file. So rather than just relying on that 1080p file, you can look at the DNG or the raw images, which are a much higher resolution. You can drop those into a time lapse, which I'll show you guys how to do in another video. So if that's interesting, make sure to get subscribed. So I'll show you guys how to do that, or just Google how to do it. But yeah, basically we're gonna be, you know, you'll want to leverage those actual individual photos if you want to make a time lapse and grade it at all. But just to show you, this is what a regular MP4 in a non-color graded format would kind of look like. So yeah, let's view our histogram. So again, we'd want to open up all those DNGs and create our own time lapse out of those files so we can actually color grade a lot more. But you know, if we were to do this, I mean, really everything does look kind of good right now. So let's go to the waveform. And so you could kind of, you know, give it a little more contrast.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, it still looks pretty good right there, right? So we're actually bringing it down a little bit too much. So, and then we could add some more saturation, and then we could just add a color grade.
The colors are just a bit more highlighted and pronounced.
Yeah, it's giving you a lot less to work with off the bat, you know. That's a little bit too dramatic. Okay, so yeah, that's that would be this last footage here. So yeah, again, see how it just looks a lot more harsh than these ones. And let's just go ahead and play the actual files so that way you can see what this little sequence looks like. It's going to look much better when it's fully exported and rendered. So anyways, guys, that was our just 3 clips that we had to color grade. I hope you guys learned something. If you guys did, make sure to get subscribed and leave the like, and stay tuned for the next video where we actually show you guys how to take those images from a hyperlapse and turn them into a high quality video. So
that's a wrap.
Peace out, guys.
Bye.